Okay, Mary Puma again, just back for a few seconds here. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce Rosalind Picard for our next keynote address. Rosalind is the founder and director of the Affective Computing Research Group at the MIT Media Lab, co-director of the Media Lab's Advancing Wellbeing Initiative, and faculty chair of MIT's Mind, Hand, and Heart Initiative. She's co-founded Empatica, Inc., creating wearable sensors and analytics to improve health, and Affectiva, Inc., delivering technology to help measure and communicate emotion. She also served as a founding member of the IEEE Technical Committee on Wearable Information Systems in 1998, helping launch the field of wearable computing. And the year before Roz was up for tenure, she took a risk and she published the book Affective Computing, which became instrumental in starting a new field by that name. Roz holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering with highest honors from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and master's and doctorate degrees, both in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT. Please join me in welcoming Rosalind Picard.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure for me to be here. I've been already incredibly inspired by what I've heard earlier. It's a hard act to follow. As was mentioned, I started an area years ago called affective computing. And the idea was to give computers the skills of emotional intelligence, something that maybe one of those other things we women are often associated with as having maybe an opportunity of a few more gifts in that area than some of our other male colleagues, although there are certainly lots of exceptions, right? Computers, however, don't have those skills. And when you try to build an AI and it doesn't see how your affective state is, it's going to do a lot of pretty annoying and stupid things. So in the beginning, when people said, oh, you're going to make the computer emotional, you're going to make it like smile at us and stuff like that, I thought, well, they're already doing that. The problem is they're doing that when we look like this. And that's not smart, right? If they're smiling and we're miserable, they should stop smiling, right? The Germans have a word, Schadenfreude, right, for if you look happy at somebody else's misfortune. It's not a good way to be, right? 101 for management, emotional intelligence. If you're delivering bad news, if things are bad, don't smile while you're doing this. This is not new wisdom from electrical engineering at MIT. This has been around at least 1,500, at least thousands of years. In the Proverbs, singing cheerful songs to a person with a heavy heart is like taking someone's coat in cold weather, which all of us who spent a winter in Boston know this is not a good thing, or pouring vinegar in a wound. So we set out to try to give computers some of these skills of emotional intelligence. And I'm not going to go through all of this today, but I'm going to give you some of the kind of adventures and surprises along the way, inspired also by Renee's very important point about narrative and story. One of the stories begins with people saying, well, the easiest thing to recognize is smiles, right? Computers should recognize if you're happy. And if you look like this, if you've ever seen the show Lie to Me, Paul Ekman's work, we're taught that if you smile not just with your mouth, but with your eyes, that means you're truly happy. Action Unit 6, cheek raise, gives us a little crow's feet here. I even wrote about this in my book. This is true. Well, it turns out it's not true. And so one of the steps along this adventure is being wrong. Let me show you an example of an experiment we do to elicit natural facial expressions in a natural interaction. Hopefully we'll get some sound cranked up here. We bring people in to test a user interface here. You can't tell them that you're trying to frustrate them, but
I am sorry. You seem to be having difficulties getting through this form. Would you mind looking at the camera and share your thoughts on how to improve the form?
This one sucks.
Yes, all of our experiments are IRB approved beforehand, and we say we're only eliciting as much stress or frustration as is natural in human-computer interaction or Boston driving or whatever we're measuring that day. Here's another person in the exact same situation. Watch for the smile. All right, so I'll just play the end of that again. Watch here. Do you see he's smiling with his eyes, not just his mouth? And so this came from that. We learned that 90% of people showed this smile when frustrated. And not just adults, it's been observed in preschoolers using educational software too. So this seems to be something people do very early on. So smiles don't necessarily mean you're happy. And when I was talking with a young man with autism at a retreat, he was explaining how he had trouble reading people's faces. He was on his 26th job. He looked like he was in his early 30s. He was not succeeding in keeping a job, obviously. And one of the challenges was understanding if the boss was pleased or displeased. If you smile when you're displeased, that is very confusing for people like this. And it's been confusing for computers. We've built computers now that are as good as people at recognizing, and this is an accuracy score of machine learning here, and these 5 different colors are human performance, higher is better, or 4 different machine learning algorithms performance, again, higher is better. And here the machine is doing as well as the human, recognizing smiles elicited in videos of people experiencing true delight. And here the machine is doing significantly better than the people at recognizing if the smile is one associated with frustration. While it's a bit complex what it's doing, the maybe simplest description that fits not all but most of the smiles is that when we're truly happy, we smile a bit slower. Those frustrated ones tend to look a little bit more jerky, knee-jerk-like. This does not mean that computers are better than people at recognizing all facial expressions. It's very limited to specific context and interpreting in that context right now. And still, people are vastly better than computers at how to interpret the full complexity of the situation and what the expression means. Our software at MIT has been commercialized and improved upon by Affectiva. And here's just an example of one of the apps they've recently released that lets you, in real time, recognize and map all kinds of different facial expressions to automatically generate your emojis or see how people are responding to what you're doing. A lot of fun. This is going in gaming and all kinds of things right now. They're now able to perform with more than 90% accuracy on more than 24 expressions with data from 75 countries and more than 50 billion emotion points. You can also, I'll just invite you if you want to play with this later, there's a free version. It does not collect data from you. It really is just a fun demo that is called FlexMe. You can download on an iOS or Android device and play with how well it works on you and all of these different expressions. So this technology now has gone from something where we were just working in the lab trying to, in the beginning, actually help people with autism better read the facial expressions of other people, and we built it into wearables that do that, to now there's an SDK that's free for anybody whose business is still making less than $1 million a year, or if you're in academia. And it's now being plugged into thousands of different applications, ranging from games that help people build social emotional skills, to autism real-time face reading of the other person's facial expressions, to healthcare, and educational content that lets people, when you put $1 million ad or educational program out there and you want to see if people are bored or interested or confused and exactly where that's happening, so you might edit the video a little bit differently, this allows you to get all of that information from the people in front of the screen. So it's very exciting to see that get out. Now, sometimes our stuff gets out in ways that I have my own. When at Affectivo we first did the smile recognition, all the trackers assumed you were symmetric. You either smiled symmetrically or you frowned symmetrically. When we first started doing real-world data that included political ads, we realized we had to have an asymmetric smile detector because people smirked. They didn't know if they should smile or frown, and they kind of did both. So I do a little bit of that with the example that comes next. This is sometimes our stuff leaves the lab in ways we hadn't quite anticipated. Let's see if this plays.
Hey, Leonard, if you're happy and you know it, no need to clap your hands because I have an emotion detector.
How's it working out?
Yeah, surprisingly well.
That's great. I'm happy for you.
No, wait, hold on. Oh, what you are, aren't you sweet?
What's that? Are you working on your resume?
No, it's my brother's. I'm trying to help him get a job out here.
Ooh, and that makes Leonard angry.
No, it doesn't.
But, Leonard, please. I know an angry face when I see it. It's this red frowny guy on my phone.
What? Are you really upset about Randall coming?
No.
Yes.
I said no.
It's like you're twins.
Leonard, if you're mad about this, just tell me.
Fine. You invited your drug dealer brother to stay with us for God knows how long and didn't bother to ask me first.
He's my brother. I didn't think I needed your permission.
Well, hey, now she's angry too. This thing works like gangbusters.
I'm not saying you have to ask my permission, but you could have talked to me about it before you said it was okay.
Like you talked to me about your gaming room?
Our gaming room. I was gonna put a scented candle in it.
He's still mad.
Stop enjoying their fight.
You first.
The comments earlier about humor caught my ear because I've really been enjoying this work, learning what makes people laugh and what makes people smile and what makes people enjoy things. And often we laugh at other people's frustration and stress as well. And I think it happens most often when it's something that we personally have experienced. So back to the points earlier about vulnerability, I think these are things that we can actually enjoy and maybe feel free to talk about more because they really can be fun once we get over our original awkwardness and embarrassment. Now, as we're working with people with autism, and one of the things I love about them is they're so honest. It can be painful sometimes. In one case, a young adult on the autism spectrum said to me, "Roz, you've got it all wrong. My biggest problem is not reading other people's emotions. My biggest problem is you're not reading my emotions properly." And at first I thought, great, I work on this. Am I really that bad? I think I said something like that to her. And she goes, "It's not just you. It's everybody's not reading my emotions accurately." And I said, "Well, what are we missing?" And she said, "You're missing the enormous stress and anxiety that I'm feeling and so many of us are feeling." And as I talked to her more about it, I realized she's completely right, and I don't know how I was missing it. While the little boy here looks stressed, there's so many times when people are enormously stressed on the inside and they're about to explode, and outwardly they just have gone blank, and especially in autism. So I also realized that we had technology that could read out this internal state. It usually would look like this. The classic was to use electrodermal activity to measure if your palms got sweaty when you were stressed, and that would make your conductance go up, and that would make an electrical signal go up. And usually this was done tethered to a computer in the lab, so it was a little hard to give to somebody in daily life. So we built versions that could leave the lab and that could not only express outwardly if that signal was going up, but that could log the data and allow us to go back and analyze it and see if there was other more interesting stuff in there. And incidentally, these have been commercialized, and they're now sold by Empatica. The bottom sensor there is the E4 that's used by researchers to collect also medical quality heart rate data and heart rate variability when you're still, skin conductance, temperature, movement. It's a medical device in Europe. It's not a medical device in the US. And Embrace, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a moment. So let me just give an example of when we took these and we built them, and first it was in a sweatband form, and here you'll see a video of a little girl who has autism. I'm going to turn off the sound because she's about to have a meltdown, and it's been a long day, and you don't need to hear a child have a meltdown right now. But here in this video, we see 1 minute of her data in this upper blue window here. The right edge is the data streaming from her left and right ankles. It will go higher with more activation. She's about to have a meltdown here right now. There it goes. And within a second afterwards, it's popped up here. But down here, we see the context. We see 45 minutes of data. And we see that actually before this peak meltdown, her left and right ankle data have been building for some time. Now, that doesn't mean she was going to have a meltdown. But if you can't attribute it to something else going on in the environment, you might want to start asking, hey, what's going on inside this little girl? We can also play the 45-minute video, which we won't do right now, and we would see that when she gets in the ball pit and starts relaxing with deep pressure on her body, starts going down. And over here, there's another big peak, which is when she's getting on a swing. And when she starts rocking on that swing, it also her signal goes down very nicely. Lots of times repetitive movements. There's famous videos of Bill Gates being sued where he's rocking in the courtroom. And we see it at MIT in the exam room. You'll look out and you'll see all these people rocking. I can see guys before a big negotiation and they're there rocking. So these are things that can bring down your skin conductance, which is produced by the sympathetic nervous system response, your fight or flight response. Here's an example those of you who are MIT students might appreciate. It's the first time I saw this data. Higher, again, is more skin conductance, more activation. It goes up with not only stress, but it also goes up with cognitive engagement, cognitive effort, mental load. And here we see it's super high. This is 24 hours. It's super high during this lab activity, during exams and studying. Notorious MIT homework problem sets really high here. And unfortunately, to the embarrassment of we MIT professors, the low point every day here is classroom activity. This happens to every audience if you don't use humor, actually. If you just do PowerPoint and don't take Q&A and don't elicit laughter, they all go flat. I know because I've measured it. And so now we have to have some more interaction. Also, to our surprise, if you're paying attention, you'll be kind of surprised by this. And you're probably scratching your head like, huh, why is it high during sleep here? Didn't she say this goes up with activation? Shouldn't sleep look like classroom activity? Well, I thought so. And it turns out this is only one person's data up here. This is a very reliable effect. And we are doing a lot more research on this. Right now, it appears that if you zoom in on these, the high-frequency patterns match single neuron hippocampal firing patterns. And in some of our studies, this signal is coming out as more significant than polysomnography, brain EEG-based data, and the actigraphy that you get from commercial sleep-wake trackers. This data is more predictive of whether you learn when you sleep than all those other things, which is pretty interesting. Now, once you build a sensor that can leave the lab, people want to borrow it. And one day right before winter break, a student comes up to me, an undergrad at Wrapup, and he says, Professor Picard, could I please borrow one of your sensors? My little brother has autism, he can't talk, and I want to see what's stressing him out over vacation. And I said, sure. In fact, don't just take one, take two, because back then they tended to break easily. They were built by hand. I said, do you need a soldering iron? He says, no, I have a soldering iron. Great, MIT students have soldering irons. So I sent him home with 2 sweatbands that look like this thing. Inside this, there's a whole bunch of electronics, home-built. I go back to my office, and I'm looking at the boy's data on my laptop. And first of all, he disobeyed me. Instead of putting one on and waiting till it broke and putting on the second one, he put them both on at the same time. Like, well, that was, not what I would have done. But I'm really glad he did it. And as I'm looking at the data, one day, the 2 signals on the boy's wrists, in this case, were very low. The next day, they're very low. The next day, they're very low, and I'm kind of yawning, thinking, well, this kid's having more relaxing vacation than I am. And I go to the next day, and my jaw drops. One of his wrist signals went so high that I thought the sensor must be broken. You know, you've been to MIT. You know, we stress people out there every way imaginable, right? We do qualifying exams. We do, in my lab, also sensory experiments. You know, you're popping a balloon in somebody's ear. We've done Boston driver stress. We have seen stress, and it has never been as high as this signal. And on the other wrist, there was nothing. So I thought that side must be broken too, because how can you be stressed on one side of your body and not the other? The two sides should do the same thing, I thought, and they should just be different, maybe with noise. Well, I won't walk you through all my debugging. I'm an electrical engineer. I tried a lot of things. And then I did something I've never done before after none of my experiments working to explain it. I called the student at home on vacation. Made me a little nervous. Hi, sorry to bug you on vacation. How's your little brother? How's your Christmas? Hey, any idea what happened to him? And I gave him the exact date and time. And he says, I don't know, I'll check the diary. And I'm like, diary? MIT student keeps a diary? Like, you know, I have 3 teenage boys. You know, well, one's not a teenager anymore, but keeping a diary, no way, right? He comes back, he's written down the exact date and time, and he says that was right before he had a grand mal seizure. Now I hear some gasps, so you know what that is. I did not know anything about seizures other than some misinformation I had as a child, so I quickly started learning a little bit more. I realized another student's dad is Dr. Joe Madsen, chief of neurosurgery over at Children's Hospital Boston. Screwed up my courage, called Dr. Madsen. Hi, Dr. Madsen, my name's Rosalind Picard. Is it possible that somebody could have a huge sympathetic nervous system surge? In this case, it looked like it was 20 minutes before a seizure. And he says, probably not. But he says, it's interesting. We have had patients whose hair stands on end on one arm 20 minutes before a seizure. And I'm like, on one arm? I didn't want to tell him that at first because I figured he'd hang up on me. And we got to talking. He got interested. He explained how, yes, a region in the brain could elicit this response on one side. And we made a bunch more devices, got them safety certified. He had 90 families coming in for a study with gold standard video, EEG, ECG, electrocardiogram, electroencephalogram, and now adding EDA, electrodermal activity, to each patient coming in. And we found that 100% of the seizures that the children had in the epilepsy monitoring unit had a whopper of a skin conductance response. Usually on both sides, and usually not 20 minutes before the seizure, usually at the same time that the gold standard synchronized EEG data showed the first signs of the seizure. We built a seizure detector with this. This was the work of Dr. Mingzer Po, finishing his PhD in my lab, electrodermal activity and accelerometer data combined here in a wearable. The seizure, it turns out, is only a couple minutes wide, and you're looking at 24 hours of data here from a teenager. The seizure's only a couple minutes wide. But the skin conductance response, the sweaty response that we thought was just like your palms getting sweaty, was going up for 20, 30 minutes. Like, what is going on? Is the person convulsing so much that they're getting really sweaty? Is the temperature going up? You know, we looked at everything and we couldn't explain it. Turns out it was not related to how much the person was convulsing or moving, or the temperature or the humidity. But then we learned something very surprising. And since then, I've been learning quite a bit about this. I'm curious, in this incredibly smart group of people here, blown away by the brain power in here, how many of you have heard of SUDEP? I bet very few, but maybe I'm wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, a small handful. Well, you've all heard of stroke and Lou Gehrig's disease and multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and meningitis and encephalitis. This is number 2 after stroke for years of potential life lost. So that's deaths times remaining lifespan of all neurological diseases. And most people have never heard of it. Furthermore, what we've been learning about in the last several years is that it might be preventable. So we could maybe drive that red bar graph down. So this is called SUDEP, and what happens is when a person with epilepsy is usually found dead, usually they were alone at the time, when they're found dead, and they can't attribute it to drowning, head injury, heart disease, or anything else, it gets called a SUDEP. So there's actually a lot more deaths from epilepsy than SUDEP, but SUDEP is the #1 cause. Well, we have learned that while a SUDEP is taking a life every 7 to 9 minutes, and probably more often than that because the numbers are known to be very underreported, we also know that if somebody's there when a seizure happens, or if somebody dies after a seizure, it's most likely that they were alone. When somebody's there, they're less likely to die. Now, you wouldn't build a house without a smoke detector, but people are sent home having these seizures all the time without a seizure detector and an alert device. And with somebody dying every 7 to 9 minutes, more people die from SUDEP every year in the US than house fires and from sudden infant death syndrome. And yet everybody's heard of sudden infant death syndrome, and everybody goes through house fire training. So I thought, okay, I'm working on all this autism and emotional intelligence stuff, and nobody's doing anything about this. And we have a seizure detector that could help here. So I think I need to learn, out of my EE area a bit more about this and do something. So we decided that given all the facts and the mounting science there, we needed to take all the stuff we were building in the lab for autism, for sensory processing, for stress, and build something that could leave the lab and help people with epilepsy. And that led to Embrace, which I'm wearing today. The Embrace is designed to take the signal that I was just showing you, the electrodermal activity, combine it with the movement data. It also measures temperature, and it has an amazing processing unit on board, state-of-the-art through a Media Lab partner, that allows us to run real-time AI machine learning algorithms to detect events, send them to a paired smartphone, and then that goes off to your caregivers to hopefully bring somebody to you ASAP to help you. It's been shown, for example, that simply stimulating a person, like flipping them over, can restart their breathing after a seizure. Now, most seizures don't kill you, fortunately, but the convulsive seizures can literally take your breath away, usually after it appears the seizure has stopped, right? When you might think the person's fine and tuck them in and let them go back to sleep. Well, don't leave them alone then. Make sure somebody's with them. They can stop breathing afterwards. Since we got this out on the market, my skin conductance goes up every time I get a mail like this. This was the first one I got from a mom. She said she was in the shower, and her phone was on the counter next to the shower, and it told her daughter needed help. She goes running out of the shower to her daughter's room, finds her face down in bed, not breathing, turning blue, flips her over, says she turned pink, and she was fine. I read this and my heart's racing and my skin conductive's going through the roof, and I'm kind of panicking and saying, first of all, don't trust it, don't leave her alone with it. What if the Bluetooth doesn't connect? What if the battery dies? What if? And she says, it's okay, I know no technology is perfect, but it got us there in time. And she, now we've been hearing from lots of other people as well. And I must say, there's a whole lot more. It's enormously exciting, and I have even more appreciation for the business world and all y'all do when we get the opportunity to take what it was really an accidental finding and start to get it out there with a huge amount of extra effort that Empatica did to improve on this and bring it to customers. Now, as a scientist, I was baffled that what we're finding as a SUDEP biomarker now is a big skin conductance response. We're learning that the larger the skin conductance response on the wrist, the longer the EEG brainwaves are shut down after a seizure. All right, now think about how weird this is. You have a seizure, your brainwaves are kind of going crazy. An EEG, a bunch of electrodes sitting on your scalp, says it's kind of going crazy. Then they suddenly either go back to normal brainwaves and the seizure's ended, or they stop reading electrical activity and you look brain dead. Turns out, in that case where it looks like your brain has stopped, our skin conductance response gets bigger, and it's highly correlated. And this is published in Neurology, replicated, and we've found it in a SUDEP recently, too, and the biggest peak of all. Why would you get a response on the wrist that you don't get on the scalp when there's brain activity going on? Well, a doctor said to me, oh, Roz, it's easy. It's Medicine 101. I'm like, oh, I never had Medicine 101. I'm an engineer. She says, well, when we were all infants, when we were all in the womb, actually, 3 kinds of tissue were woven together to form us. And one of them, the ectoderm, knit together our brain, our neural, our spinal cord, all of the neural tissue with our largest organ, the skin, from the very beginning. While the other kinds of tissue went on to form our lungs, our bones, and so forth. So the ectoderm has knit together brain signals in a very complicated way with our skin. And it's turning out now that what we're getting is not just a generic sweat response, where you're just getting sweaty all over when you're stressed, but it's turning out to be individually patterned to some different parts of the body, things we never expected to find. So now we're very excited to get to do a lot more basic science to try to understand more about what wearables of the future worn on different places might be able to tell us about stuff going on, not on the surface of the brain, but deep in the brain, where these centers of emotion, memory, and attention are. Now, before doing this kind of detour that took us through this exciting set of epilepsy learnings, I was just building AIs, and one day my boss, a couple directors ago at the Media Lab, said to me, "Roz, when are you going to do something useful? When are you going to build me the mood ring that tells me my wife's mood before I go home?" I wasn't sure how this would go over in this audience. Usually the men love this. Makes us laugh too, right? But maybe for different reasons. So I thought, mood ring, well, that was just a stupid temperature sensor that turned things colors, right? Like, we're at MIT. We like to do things that are hard, important. Okay, so maybe a mood ring would pay for all of my students' research and my kids' college educations better than what I do now. But I want to do something hard that really matters. And so we started thinking more about what's important about mood, what really needs to be done. I'm going to play a video that's just a little over 2 minutes for you here of this latest work. And actually, right before I do that, there's a picture of the output of this device that tells us that we can get more with this today than just the electrodermal activity that I'm showing you. We're getting also sleep-wake, which is really important, physical activity, which you guys know from consumer wearables like steps, and then the little purple here are seizures, but we can actually train it with the AI to recognize much more complicated and interesting patterns. And all of that is available today with this. Okay, so now here's something more we can do when we take the smartphone kinds of processing of this data and the wearable, and we put it together.
Over the last century, depression has been on the rise, particularly with young adults and many college students. By 2020, one suicide will happen somewhere in the world every 20 seconds. By 2030, it will be the #1 disease burden. Disability and lives lost from depression will be greater than from cancer, war, accidents, and stroke. The Snapshot Study is an NIH-funded collaborative research project between MIT Affective Computing Group and the Harvard Medical School's Brigham and Women's Hospital Division of Sleep and Circadian Disorders. Together, we study how daily behaviors and social connections influence sleep and health and outcomes such as mood, stress, and academic performance. We want to use what we learn to help build a system that automatically detects when an individual is becoming unhappy and help them before they become depressed. We have measured about 300 undergraduate students' health, behaviors, and other external factors like weather and location, and how they experience their own mood and well-being, using a wearable sensor, smartphone, and surveys. Each participant was monitored for 30 days, resulting in over 7,000 days of data. We found out that individuals with behavioral patterns connected with self-reported high stress to have more irregular sleep, are using their phones late at night, working long hours, and have negative social interactions. The self-reported calm participants in our study generally took breaks at noon and exercised in the evening. Through social network data we collected through calls, text messages, email, and surveys, we hope to find specific social patterns that distinguish between stressed and calm people, or good and poor sleepers. We aim to help predict how people feel and will feel in the future without them reporting anything. As this study continues, we are gaining better understanding about how to predict and improve a person's mood. Ultimately, we hope to prevent most depression from happening. That would make a happier future for people worldwide.
just got a couple more slides. The prediction of mood, I didn't even think we could do it. And my super impressive students, I should have put this picture up here. You'll see in a moment, good news we got on this paper. And what you don't see is that it was written by 5 women. People think machine learning is only done by guys. Well, that's wrong, of course. But here, these amazing women I'm working with at MIT said, we think we could predict if your mood tomorrow night is good or bad, if your stress is high or low, if your health is healthy or unhealthy. So we've simplified the problem initially here, a binary decision, just to see if the machine learning would do better than 50-50, better than random here. We trained on the hundreds of New England college students that were mentioned there before. You always have to train on data that you hold out completely separate from data you're going to test on. And we also made sure the priors came out right and all this other stuff to make sure that we could trust these results. Could we do better than 50-50 on this problem? I was hoping for 55, 60. We have already, with the latest machine learning results, which is an innovation over what was in the literature before, gotten 82 to 87% accuracy predicting this. And this is a paper that just won Best Paper Prize at the top machine learning neural information processing conference workshop for health. So it does appear to be possible to start to predict things tomorrow night. We're now making the problem harder now that we believe it's actually somewhat doable, and working on more finer regression prediction of your state tomorrow night. Now think about this. At first this may be a little troubling, okay? I'm gonna look at my smartphone, it's gonna collect my data for a while, it learns about me, it learns about people like me, and it's gonna tell me, okay Roz, the rate you're going, tomorrow night your stress is gonna be worse, your mood is gonna be worse. Like, okay, maybe that's not quite what people wanna keep using, right? It's like a weather forecast where, what if the weather's bad? Well, it turns out that we know what to do with the weather's bad, right? If it's hurricanes, we're getting people out of Florida or whatever. But we can't change the weather, and we've had this mentality of you just got to deal with the weather. But when it comes to our internal affective weather, we actually could change the future if we could forecast it accurately. And furthermore, we could also learn from your prior data what you've done that could change it most effectively for you. So what we're doing now is the machine learning not only to forecast it, but to try to help you identify what in your sleep, wake, stress, social, all these different things, your bedtime, I've got about 600 things we're measuring, so I'm not going to list them all here. But what for you could make the difference, so that if you get this crappy weather forecast for tomorrow night, you could say, okay, but you're telling me if I go to bed 2 hours early and do something that makes me laugh tonight, I may have 40% lower chance of stress tomorrow night and 50% higher chance of a good mood. And then you can choose to change the weather. So that's what we're working on now. It's very hard. Here's just an example of 2 beautiful sleep patterns we have from 2 different people. One thing we've learned is how important sleep is. I know it's hard for all of us, especially the multinational companies. Both my companies are in 2 different countries also. And when you have here, this is 24 hours. The red and the yellow red is more activity. This is just activity-based sleep-wake detection here. We're actually doing much more sophisticated, but this shows nicely on this graph. Here's a college student usually going to bed between 2 and 3 a.m., usually getting up by 9 or 10 a.m., but a pretty regular sleeper. This person has the same average time they sleep for average sleep duration, but they're a very irregular sleeper. When we control for the duration of sleep and for the stress and gender and all those good things, your regularity or your irregularity of sleep for New England college students makes a huge difference in your mental health. It also makes a huge difference in your stress if we look directly at that. So if you have, so this may be something you want to play with. Everybody always tells us 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I'm now looking not just at the 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but try to make it regular. I know it's super hard when you change time zones, but if you have control over it, try making it regular and see what that does for your mood as well. All right, quick wrap up here. taken you on a journey of some of our adventures and stories through this affective computing space, ranging from the smile that we thought was, surely meant you're happy, but it doesn't. It's much more complicated than that, to now going out of the lab, companies like Affective getting millions of examples that can now allow the accuracy to get much better and interpret this better in different contexts for lots of different applications. And they've got a free SDK for people to plug into different games and applications. Back to autism, where we started, but this time not trying to help people with autism understand other people, but trying to help them be better understood. While we were working on that, trying to understand stress, and actually we're back to this now, trying to predict meltdowns and all. But while working on that problem, we accidentally found that we were picking up unusual autonomic activity associated with seizures. We found out that that's furthermore correlated with the brain-based biomarker for SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And that if we could get an alert there, people would have possibly a significantly better chance of staying alive after a seizure, and we could maybe push that SUDEP bar graph down. So we're very committed to that at Empatica now, with lots of top partners there. Now we're back to taking all this data that these wearables and smartphones are giving us and trying to do personalized machine learning to not just give you a personalized weather forecast for tomorrow night, but also to give you personalized insights into what should change for you. I don't know about you, but I'm always skeptical of these things you read in the paper that are for a big group, right? Maybe that doesn't apply to me. And indeed, in our data, the thing that works for the group doesn't apply to everybody in the group. So with the wearables and smartphones today, why can't we each get personalized insights and personalized forecasts and personalized advice of what we could try changing to improve that weather forecast for us tomorrow? And just one of the many possibilities there is sleep that I wanted to share with you. I am so excited to be here, and I'm happy to take some questions. And I just wanted to thank you so much for including me in this amazing group of people. I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Oh, there you are. I'm looking for you. I hear the voice from up there.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very inspired. Thank you for, sometimes it's hard to understand the connections between the research process and how to apply. And I'm so glad that you gave such a beautiful example of trying to solve one problem and then stumbling upon another one that is even more important. But even more so, I have a question and a comment. I'm really excited about the last part of your research because as a woman professional, I learned the hard way that sleep was really important. And it wasn't until I had breakdowns, tremendous breakdowns, either in my marriage or at work, that it was like, okay, eventually, using Fitbit, I saw that sleep was super important. But it took that data to convince me. So first of all, I'm super excited because it also is very difficult as an individual to find out what are the things that you can prevent, what are the things that you can do to improve your quality of life and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited about that because it is a personal difficult problem, but I can only imagine also from a data. One question I have for you is that, is it also a possible way of research to actually work with really good data analysts? Because there is an element of modeling that comes from the creativity of the human brain. And the example I have is very pedestrian, but it puzzles me, which is I had someone in my family who was a data analyst for Wall Street and was one of those really brilliant people in doing predictive models for earnings. And this person, with the same problem I had with sleep, which took me I totally was like, this is not it, forget about it. Yeah, I sleep 5 hours a night or 4 hours a night, who cares? I'm ambitious, I wanna, But this person had this keen ability to nail down things like that out of a variety or a multitude of pieces of data. So my question to you is, could somehow working with really good analysts be used to calibrate these models out of this multitude of data points and possible avenues of research?
Definitely, yeah. I liken, this is where the metaphor to weather forecasting, I think, is helpful. Of course, it breaks down when it comes to changing the weather, but it's very helpful when it comes to the data analytics. 150 years ago, people thought it was nuts if somebody said, we're going to forecast weather. And then some of these nutcases, started collecting objective data in different cities and openly sharing it and building sophisticated models to try to predict it. And I think the same thing needs to happen here. The numbers I gave you of 82 to 87%, right now that's just limited to a group of New England college students. We need to collect the data from a much more diverse group of people. We need to collect it from people of all ages, from people with different kinds of lives and lifestyles in different cities. We're actually right now looking for partners, talking with companies and HR departments in Japan and in India and all over the world, because we want to do what was done for weather and really build the models that will enable people to take charge of their health. In a longer talk, I would show you trajectories of depression, which, as it said, the World Health Organization has said it's going to bypass cancer, war, accidents, stroke by 2030. Actually, it already has bypassed them for years lived with disability just this year. So we want to see if we could make that forecast of that really bad, depressing, those bad, depressing numbers for the year 2030 not come true, right? Why should that be? And while the drug companies really don't want that forecast to change, there's bonanza for them. Every other company that has employees that doesn't want to see 25, 30% of them take the path to depression do want to see those numbers change. So we definitely need top data analytics people to join us in this. And we need people worldwide actually to join us in this. My group can't tackle this alone. Yep. Yeah, actually we have efforts in our lab where those of us who've done years of, and I've done more than 20 years of machine learning and data analytics modeling at MIT. When we watch what we do a lot of repetitive stuff, and one of our students was saying the other day in the lunch line, he goes, I just realized I'm automating myself out of my future job. I'm trying to replace myself. We're trying to build the machine learning that learns the part that we do on top of the machine stuff, to make it better. I don't think we're replacing ourselves. We seem to manage to come up with new problems faster than we solve the other ones. But we may be replacing some of the parts of our job that need to be scaled a little bit more quickly. I know we want to hear Lottie, and I don't want to run too much into her time. So I'm also going to be around during the reception if that's a better time for Q&A. But I'm also happy to take lots of Q&A. But let's go on to Lottie. Yeah. Oh, one more? Mm-hmm.
Heartfelt thank you. As a parent of a daughter with epilepsy, thankfully her seizures are under control. But we have been in situations, emergency room, terrifying situations. So your great work is, I'm grateful for your work. And
thank you.
In our frustration with science, with the physicians, with the answer being more medication, science is so far from unlocking the mysteries of epilepsy. But my engineer husband has assured me that the engineers will solve the problems of
MIT. We're working with the Sloan people together. We need each other.
I will catch up with you afterwards with a couple of questions, but thank you.